Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our small business series. I'm Matt McKenna with SCORE Middle Georgia. SCORE is a volunteer organization whose mission is to foster vibrant small business communities through mentoring and education. And so we really appreciate the Greater Macon Chamber of Commerce hosting us both physically and virtually as we continue our series of programs to inform and engage small business owners. As we go through this series, please let us know if you have any specific topics or issues that you'd like to address. Today, we're going to be talking about social media marketing. In a couple of weeks, we'll be talking about marketing strategies. So now I'd like to turn it over to Andrew Eck, who's the Small Business Vice Chair for the Greater Macon Chamber of Commerce.
Thanks, Matt. Before I introduce our speaker for today, we are going to try to make this more interactive and not just a one-way. So as Robert talks to us about social media, please ask us questions in the chat. So the bottom of the screen, there's a chat, and I just sent a message to everybody. It sends it out to everybody so we can see it, and we see it, we'll ask the question, and we'll try to get your questions answered. So please don't wait to the end. Just go ahead and ask us questions. We may answer it at the end, but want to hear what you want to know. So today I'd like to introduce you my friend Robert Grant. He is best known for a lot of things. One of his main things is he's a video blogger with the channel That Guy You Met Yesterday. That's the name of the channel, is That Guy
You Met Today.
Oh, today.
Today.
He does quite a few other things. He's definitely a hustler. Between printing t-shirts, making hand sanitizer, and running a printing company. He also does social media consulting for different organizations and is the director of Spark Macon. So without any further ado, Robert, talk to us about social media.
Well, thank you for introducing me and showing everyone how confusing of a person I am. So today I was asked to come and talk about social media marketing, and it's one of those things that for a lot of people can be kind of a scary and complicated thing, but I'm hoping to kind of simplify kind of the meat of it and really pull it down and break it down into pieces that are easily digestible. And please, like Andrew said, if you have any questions, please drop them down in the comments because I'm going to be hitting this very from a very broad standpoint, but I know that with social media, there are a lot of very specific needs and specific questions. So if you've got those, drop those down in the comments. So I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully we can see that. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Robert, thanks.
All right. So getting the word out using social media effectively. Like Andrew said, I do social media consulting. I have a social media marketing business where I specialize in food service, hospitality, and the tourism areas. Not a great place to be in during a pandemic, but that was just sort of my area based on the fact that I was but I am a food vlogger in particular. So I kind of fell into that area, and it gave me a really good insight for what the needs of my particular clients were. And all the things we're going to talk about are good for pretty much any business. So we'll just hop right into it and talk about what we're going to talk about today is a very, very, very brief overview of basic marketing, just to make sure we're all on the same page about how marketing works. And then we'll get into the kinds of posts that you can use in your online marketing and advertising. Also the wall, which is something that I find that a lot of people don't completely understand, and arguably is the most important thing. We're going to talk about influencer marketing, which is my personal specialty, along with guerrilla marketing, which is just a lot of fun, and it's one of my favorite things to do for clients. And then we'll talk about the major social media platforms and their individual strengths or superpowers, as I like to call it, and then Q&A, but I think the questions are going to be kind of coming the whole time we're doing this. So SWOT. This is really kind of marketing 101. You're going to do this with any type of marketing, social media or not. And SWOT just stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. By taking all of these categories and looking at them objectively, and the key is objectively, you have to tell the truth to yourself about your business is basically what this is for. And this lets you know, or this lets you analyze your business from that objective standpoint. And this is the most critical part in figuring out how you're going to market your business, because you have to accept what you're good at and you have to accept what you're not so good at, so that you can then you can figure out what it is that you need to say to your prospective customers. So any good marketing campaign starts with this. This is the most basic thing. Examples of figuring out what you're trying to do in marketing come to, are you trying to lead more people to your website? Are you trying to make more brick and mortar customers? Are you trying to generate more followers for your social media platform? This is how you figure out what direction that you're going. And also it helps you figure out what exactly you're trying to convey to an audience or those prospective customers. So let's talk about the types of social media posts. This goes for pretty much any social media platform. You have organic posts and you have boosted posts. So an organic posts are regular posts. It's your stream of consciousness. You say whatever you want to say, put a picture, whatever, you throw it up online. That's an organic post. Simple. A boosted post, and each platform has a different name for what this means, but this is a post that you are paying money to have this content forced out to an audience. These are the ads that you see on Facebook, Instagram, any of that stuff. These are examples of boosted posts. The thing to be very, very careful and very, very aware of with boosted posts or paid ads, especially when it comes to Facebook, and we'll talk about the differences between the different platforms later on, but is that with most platforms, once they know that you are willing to pay money for people to see what you're putting out there, they are going to make you continue to pay for people to see that content. So I've always told clients in the past that you kind of have to make a decision very early in your marketing how you're going to go about pushing your content. Whether you're going to be doing it organically, which, it can be much slower going when it comes to building an audience and having your efforts convert those viewers or that audience into customers, or whether you're going to pay, which makes things go a little bit faster, but you have to have a budget for that. And a lot of businesses, especially if they're in the startup phase, or they're, just fairly new, or maybe they're just a very, very small business, that can eat up a lot of your potential profit. So that's something you have to be very, very aware of, is that once you do it, once you sort of contaminate your social media platform by paying for a post, you're kind of locked into that forever. So this on this slide here is an example of, I'm pretty sure that this is out of date. I need to update this, but this just shows you kind of what it looks like when you're going to set up a boosted post. You're going to have a total budget, which, it can range from a couple of dollars all the way up to hundreds of dollars per day. And what happens is they sort of entice you with, in this particular case, by saying, this is the number of people that you can reach per day. In this particular case, it's 58 to 210. Realistically, you'll be at about 150 with this particular campaign. What you have to look at is this, in this case, $10, which you will continue to have to pay to reach this number of people, worth it for whatever you're trying to sell? Many times the answer is no, depending on what you're doing. If you're in the service industry in particular, like services like maybe HVAC or, things like that, you may be better off doing this. If you're selling a product, this may not be the way you want to go, but we'll get back into that here in a little while.
So, Robert, just a quick question. So, is that pretty true across all platforms that once you start paying, you pay more, or is there any difference, say, between using Google or Facebook? Or they're all pretty similar in terms of our algorithms that want to get you to pay?
For the sake of conversation, yes. There's some variances in how it affects your posting or getting content out later. But for the most part, in general, pay once, you're going to have to keep paying to see the same results.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the wall. The wall is basically the point where the consumer will no longer trust a message or recommendation that comes from you about whatever you are trying to sell them. An example of this is if you own a restaurant, because most of my clients own restaurants, you're always going to say that your food is delicious and it's the best. Well, the consumer knows that, and they're only going to take your word up to a point. You, of course, with a restaurant, as an example, you have the opportunity to show your food. You know, it looks delicious, fine, but you can only be trusted up into a point, and that goes for pretty much anything. There's nothing that comes to mind immediately that you can get complete consumer confidence based on a social media interaction. So there isn't really a great way to get over that wall by yourself. Again, typically, it just kind of one of those things that is what it is, especially when it's something that has a highly subjective value, like food, for example. So to elaborate on that a little bit here, we have the audience trust barrier, which is basically the proper way of saying the wall. The barrier exists because you can't be a neutral party in this information transaction. The audience has no idea who you are typically, and even if they do, or even if you're a noteworthy person, that trust may be extended slightly, but you can't break completely through it. And you know, I keep saying this because it's so important to understand that no matter what you do, there is a point when the confidence in you as the salesman effectively runs out. Also, really important to note that depending on your industry, there is going to be conflicting information because your competition is likely saying the exact same thing as you about whatever their product or service is. So that's another thing you have to keep in mind is what are my competitors saying about effectively, you know, a similar or even the same product depending on what you're doing. So how do we get over this wall? This is kind of what the whole purpose of this is we've got to break through that wall. And it's not going to be catapults or airplanes. And there are two ways. One is influencer marketing, which is what I do. Influencer marketing is anytime that you get someone else to talk about your business. This is something that I think now in 2020, we're very used to seeing. This was something that, you know, people would look at you like you had three heads if you said the word influencer marketing, not so much the case anymore. What's important about influencer marketing is that now you have a neutral, hopefully, if you're doing it correctly, a neutral third party that's talking about your business, and it breaks down that audience trust barrier because ideally, this influencer has no stake in your business, typically isn't going to care one way or another, you know, what they're saying or how they're saying something about your business. And the audience also knows that. And then also it comes down to, well, when you're selecting an influencer, having an influencer come in and do that content for you that has a similar audience that you're trying to appeal to. And that goes back to the SWOT analysis that you would do at the very, very beginning. because that's going to help you determine who you're talking to. And we're going to get into how to determine who you're talking to in a couple of slides from here. The next way is guerrilla marketing. And I really love dad jokes, and I had to throw the gorilla on there. But this is where you get something else to talk about your business. So this is guerrilla marketing is a very broad term here. So I have some examples because many people haven't run into guerrilla marketing in a way that specifically identifies it. So let's talk about that a little bit. Here's an example of Nestle and Colgate came together, like this says, it was unlikely or seemingly contradictory pairings that join forces to make you a victim of marketing. A victim of marketing is somebody that sees some marketing thing and it causes them to take an action of some kind. That makes you a victim of marketing. In this case, we have a woman that is eating an ice cream bar, and what would normally be pretty boring popsicle stick inside of it turns out to be a wooden toothbrush with Colgate marketing on it. Now, this is a great example because of the contradictory pairing, but also because this is going to be nearly impossible to forget, because this is something, it's inside your food. You're going to eat this and you say, what on earth is this? And you're not going to forget when you're in your grocery store and you're going down the toothpaste aisle, you're going to remember that you saw this weird advertisement for Colgate in this particular situation. So this is a really blatant example of what guerrilla marketing is. Another one that can be a little bit more subtle is this Mr. Clean one, where they essentially painted a piece of the crosswalk and put a Mr. Clean logo on it. It very quickly demonstrates the product. It's striking and surprising. You know, as we walk around our daily lives, you know, we're very distracted and in our own world. As you're walking, probably looking down at the ground, you're going to see this, and it could effectively stop you in your tracks. Probably not very good in the middle of the street, but this is something that would also be very hard to forget, and it makes a large statement very quickly.
And Robert, I mean, the point of the guerrilla marketing, most likely, is not to necessarily target the people walking on the street, but is to get someone to take a photo of it. And
right. Yeah.
You're your influencer that you don't have to pay. You're
one or two slides ahead of me.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks a lot. So here's a couple of other more striking examples. My favorite here is the Shark Week surfboard. I want to say this was Miami. Discovery Channel just went and laid a bunch of these surfboards out with a bite taken out of them and just kind of left them for people to find. This is an incredible example of guerrilla marketing, because this is something you cannot be on a beach, walk past, and not pick it up and take a picture of it. And that's very important, because now they have done a physical marketing campaign with this physical item that now has transferred itself onto a digital platform via sort of manipulating the viewer into that action of posting that photo online. Another example directly below that is a carousel for a resort that apparently has a really impressive pool. This is an example of taking a captive audience. In this case, is a baggage claim at an airport. You're taking people that they have to wait. They're going to see this belt going around and around for 15 or 20 minutes. This is a great time to market to them, and this is what they did. Another one's a bit more subtle is National Geographic. They're taking this photo that's on the wall and a thing on the ground, and they're saying, they're sort of giving you an experience that's showing you how much dedication they put into the product that they're making, which in this case is a nature documentary. They're sort of, taking that consumer that's, I think this is maybe a subway station or something, and they're saying, hey, look how dedicated the person was that took the photo in front of you. Because this says, what, if you can't, just in case you can't read it, it says, what does it take to get the photo? Stand here with a camera for 3 years is what the square says down there. So their goal in this case is to impress the person that's walking by enough to say, you know what, maybe I should check this out and see what this person that, you know, stood in one spot for 3 years, what the end product of that is. So that's also very effective. Any questions about guerrilla marketing, guys? No, we're good. So how does any of this relate to social media? Well,
Hey, Robert, just a quick question
yeah.
on the influencer thing.
Mhm.
Can you talk to us about the use of paid influencers?
Well, okay. So typically all influencer marketing is going to be paid influencer marketing for the most part. There are some kind of unusual situations where you don't see that, but most people that, you know, consider themselves an influencer are, you know, they're going into this for profit one way or another. And typically, because the audience that they talk to is of value, which is why you would be having a conversation. They know that value, and they're going to, you know, charge accordingly. So typically, you know, a smaller audience will have a smaller price tag for that, and larger audience have a larger price tag. I say that you also, when it comes to, you know, just like with you know, boosting posts, you also have to be careful because, you know, like myself as a as an influencer, I have to be very aware of my credibility to my audience, because the only reason that that audience has value is because that audience that I talk to knows that I have credibility, and they know that even if I'm being paid to be somewhere, that I'm going to say exactly how I feel about it. So reputation when it comes to influencers is very critical. It's everything. It's absolutely everything that you have as an influencer is your credibility. So, you know, paid or not, credibility and audience size are going to be really your two main metrics that you're looking for. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's just interesting. We think that as that concept gets more and more popular, that people would start to distrust paid influencers, just like they would distrust the owner for saying things. So I guess
I
that's
think so I mean, in my own, and this is anecdotal, but in my own experience, I've found that it kind of comes down to, because I deal with restaurants and reviewing restaurants, that if I never say I don't like something, then I start to lose people. So it almost comes down to, you know, for myself, what I find myself doing is forcing myself to say at least one thing that I don't like about a situation that I'm in. Like I have to. It's kind of like if you're trying to do pros and cons, you have to have both. And if I'm in some weird situation where I don't have both, I have to make light of that and say that, look, I went into this, I didn't find anything that was important enough, you know, in the room for improvement to mention, and that was just the way it was. So, you know, it's kind of just it's a bit of a balancing act to maintain your credibility in that regard.
Robert, what about customer feedback? So is that something that you could use to be, you know, to break down the wall as well?
So that's something that it really depends on what you're doing. And it also depends on what platform that you're on. And it also depends on where that customer feedback is. So for example, let's say you see more now across your Facebook feed, there'll be an ad for, let's say, you know, just a random product. Okay. If you go down to the comments section, you may see lots of things that say, oh, I've just loved my blank, blank, blank so much. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to look at that and say, yeah, that's completely fake. You know, but if I'm on, let's say, you know, Andrew, to use you for, so if I'm on your social media page. And let's say you posted a picture of one of your furniture pieces, and somebody was just like, oh, I have one of these and I just love the way it looks, and thank you guys so much for delivering this so quickly. I'm going to take that with more credibility being on your actual page than in the comment section of a paid ad. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's, it's, but even then there is a barrier. I think just depending, there are ways that will shift that barrier forward, but there's still a stopping point no matter what.
But putting customers' faces or their houses or the actual finished product,
Right.
if you're a mason, you're a finished driveway that you put together, or just a smile on a customer's face in the
Right.
restaurant that you run, and then let them kind of speak through that.
Right.
That helps break down that wall, because it's putting someone else's credibility, even if they're not actually clicking and posting on it,
Right.
to do that.
Right. But I think it's just that the wall only comes up because of the skepticism around, did this person get paid to say this? Is this person actually who they say that they are? Is this person actually a customer, or is this the owner's wife that is saying these things? So it's, the level of skepticism definitely changes by age, for sure. Typically, the younger you are, the more skeptical you're going to be of just about anything that you see online. Versus older, you're gonna have some skepticism. You're gonna have a grain of salt, but typically you're gonna take things at a bit more face value. But that also still depends on what you're selling and the context about where that information is posted. So let's see, where am I? All right, how does all this relate to social media? So like Andrew had said earlier here, guerrilla marketing campaigns are typically designed to have the viewer of that campaign post whatever they're seeing to social media. Let's see, I'm going through my notes here. I already said a couple of these things. Yeah, like I was saying with the surfboard, you can't walk past it on a beach and not post it to the internet. That's really the complete purpose of guerrilla marketing. But I've heard of some marketing techniques that were offline, and one was a store, I think it was in Georgia, that they were a furniture store, but they started selling appliances. And one of the appliances they started selling were reach-in coolers, like chest freezers, and they were having a hard time selling it. So what they came up with was everyone that walked in the store, they would give them a gallon of ice cream. They were looking for a freezer. If they came in looking for a freezer, they would essentially give them a gallon of ice cream. And the thing that was important about the people that were coming in looking for a freezer or a refrigerator, whatever it was at this particular time, is that they probably had a broken one at home. So here's this gallon of ice cream that I can't do anything with. And they were kind of twisting people's arms into buying the refrigerator or the freezer. It's kind of a little bit lost on me now, but this is a guerrilla marketing technique that wasn't designed to be posted online. So it can work online and offline, but what's important about them is that they just tend to be very, very creative. I always loved the ice cream refrigerator freezer thing. So it's time to get awkward. And I said earlier that we're coming up with a marketing campaign. You have to be very objective. You have to be objective nearly to a fault. And one of those areas that you have to have a very, very, very good grasp on is who your customer is or who you're talking to completely. So that means we have to talk about race. And I'm not talking about cars or motorcycles. The race of your intended customer is very important for a few reasons. Effective messaging techniques with different racial groups can vary drastically. For example, people of color tend to respond favorably to ads with images of people that look like them. That's pretty basic. You know, if you're, you know, especially people of color, if you're trying to say, hey, I'm talking to you, you need to put people in your advertising, in your imagery, or you need to put images that are going to resonate with that particular group that you're talking about. And the other, you know, conversely, race is very important because you don't want to offend any groups. So knowing what kind of messaging is going to be favorable and what kind of messaging is going to be offensive is very, very critical, and can, you know, especially in 2020, can make or break a business because you made a faux pas with your online marketing. It's also very important because of the demographic targeting that you're able to do on platforms, especially like Facebook, that have very, very, very specific ways that you can target people. And we'll talk about those individual categories here in just a second. But the more that you can narrow down who you want to talk to, the more efficiently you'll spend your money. And this is why this is arguably why this is most important, because this comes down to how much money that you're going to spend reaching the people that you want to reach. And it's important to say that being broad is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the likelihood of reaching the people that you really want to talk to will be severely diminished. So the categories that you're typically going to look, if you answer all of these questions, you're going to be appropriately narrow in your audience selection. So we have age, gender, race, physical location, relationship status, educational level, religious affiliations, and then one special trait. Now, the special trait can be anything, like it can be a hobby, it can be, it can even overlap some of the other things, but typically it's a behavior or maybe a complementary business that person has an interest in. So for example, if you're trying to sell Ford trucks, for example, and I'm trying to put an ad out, then I am going to look for people that maybe are interested in Chevy trucks or Toyota trucks or just monster trucks. I don't know, just something that shows an interest in that particular area, but that's outside of the bubble that I'm aiming for. The fewer of these questions that you answer makes your audience selection more broad. So by filling this in, you're really being laser focused on who you're talking to. Some of these other things like educational level are things that you will have to extrapolate from other things. It's like, for example, my wife is a medical technologist, which basically means she's a clinical scientist. If I wanted to market to people like her, I would probably find healthcare related Facebook groups. And there's a very good chance that, you know, when it comes to people that are going to be on those groups, you can set sort of a base educational level for where those people will fall. So that's kind of a way, you know, in one case that you can extrapolate educational level, and you would kind of do the same thing for the other categories. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, one of the other things is you mentioned, okay, someone looking for a Chevy truck, you know, try to advertise, you know, Ford truck to them.
Mm-hmm.
But that might be a saturated market and be more expensive to get into.
Right.
So if you also try to think about unrelated events, such as graduating college, and interest in trucks,
Mm-hmm.
is something that you can narrow it down, because a lot of college graduates buy a new vehicle when they get a new job.
Right.
So try to find people that are searching for college graduation robes or, you know, parties or things like that, could also be someone that might be buying a new vehicle.
Right. And that would fall into the special trait area. So their special trait in your example would be people that are shopping for college robes. because you can now assume some things about their immediate behavior, that they're probably going to buy something. I did that immediately after graduating college. I bought the most expensive truck that I could afford at the time. Really, really smart stuff. Um,
Yeah, Robert, I have a question too on this. If you kind of flip this, if you say, for example, one of our participants has a product he sells in educational institutions. So if you go into thinking that your target market is educators, and so that would be the kind of primary thing I've got in my head. I want to go after educators. But within this, is there then a segmentation to say, well, let me think about educators in Middle Georgia, and this is probably stereotypical, but tend to be women, more women than men, are in the educational system in Middle Georgia, and or certain parts of society tend to be people of color versus others. So even though I'm thinking at the top level, I'm selling educational products, would you then maybe sub-segment that and tailor that a little bit, thinking that, hey, the educators actually break down in these groups, or you just kind of stick with the primary theme, and because I guess it could backfire on you if you're trying to be too patronizing toward any one group with this product. So how do you balance kind of that targeting with appearing to be sort of patronizing?
That's one of those things that it varies wildly by what you're talking about. It comes to, it's kind of like the messaging. The messaging, you want to be as appropriately broad as it can be.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, getting too specific could cause more problems than being a little bit less specific.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I guess a little bit of experience in social media marketing and
Mm-hmm.
trying campaigns with different kinds of messaging
Mm-hmm.
is more helpful. But at the same time, there's things where, sort of pandering isn't going to hurt you. It's just really going to be, it's really going to come down to what you're talking about. It's it's kind of hard to, give a blanket answer for, what to do or what not to do, but it's all about finding your appropriate amount of specificity or broadness, or your amount of broad.
And I'll speak for Robert on this, but you have to know your customers, and so people that are watching, do you know all these attributes that are on this slide? And do you know not only who your customers are, and you may have 3 or 4 different types of customers, but do you know when they buy it? Both during the time of day or the time of their life, depending on the purchase. If you're a convenience store, people buy lottery tickets after work, and they buy lottery tickets on Fridays after work, even more so. But do you know all those attributes? So that's a challenge. But the thing is so Robert, how do you find that out? Let's say you just started a service company this year, and you don't really know who your customers are. You only have a few customers. Is it something that you can just discover in the first year, or is it going to take time?
So in my own experience, I have found the best results by asking people questions. I've also found a lot of success by advertising in a very, very broad way at first. And then once I have, let's say, maybe a dozen data points, looking at where they overlap, and then whittling it down from there. With for example, with the printing business that I started, when I started that, my intention was business cards. I just wanted to just crank out business cards like crazy. And that was because anecdotally, before I started that, I would run into a lot of people that needed business cards. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna grab these people. I'm gonna get them. The problem in my case was that the people the people in my physical location, so if we go over to the list here, the people in my physical location, their overall needs wasn't being able to make the connection with a business card. It was advertising. It was advertising their business to strangers via flyers. So in this particular case, well, in my particular case, the needs of the population to the point where they're actually opening their wallets were different than the needs that they were basically just saying, man, I need some business card. Man, I need some business cards. But yeah, they were interested in the business cards, but that wasn't what they wanted to spend their money on. In this case, it was flyers. So it pulled me in a different direction. Now, in that particular case, this list probably wouldn't have helped me. But this definitely could have helped me lead me in that direction, based on probably the special trade area, which would have been like, do they have a business that's in the earlier startup phase, because they're going to be wanting to advertise face to face, not necessarily with a business card, and then also possibly age. Because I was dealing with people that are a bit younger and that tend to not gravitate towards business cards as much. So, the list is still relevant. In my case, not quite as important. And this is going to vary for everyone anyway.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is the end goal of social media is to drive sales.
Right.
And, 1 million views on Facebook or 1,000 likes is meaningless if it gets 0 sales. So, is there any way to distinguish people that like your content versus liking your actual product or service?
Not necessarily. There is a difference. I think the closest answer to that is that and this is something I struggle with, is that, people will watch content, but what you need to do is that you have to have, you need a call to action on that content always. So you need to have, I don't want you to just watch this cool video that I made. I want you to subscribe to my page. I want you to like my page. I want you to join my audience so that when I try to sell you something later, you're going to see it. And that is where, a lot of people, especially influencers that are building market or that are building audiences, struggle, because people will enjoy something, they'll watch it, but if they don't stick around by clicking subscribe or like, or, or whatever the option is, they're just it's a view, but it doesn't benefit them later on. And that's going to be the same for a business. You don't want people just liking your post. You want them to stick around. All right. Come on, there we go. All right, so kind of touched on this a little bit before, but I just want to reiterate that, if you want to be neutral and inclusive, that's a good thing. I encourage that, but you just have to remember that the more broad that you are, the more that you will potentially have to spend reaching a paying customer, because you can include everybody, but the thing is everybody isn't your customer. So you have to remember that those ad dollars are going, you're going to throw away potentially a lot of ad dollars being too broad. So, like I was saying to Matt a while ago, being appropriately broad is important. So which social media platform should you be using? Every social media platform has a superpower, or the thing that it does really well, and that's what we're about to go into. For the sake of the conversation, we're going to be talking about 6 of them, and I made this presentation before TikTok was a thing, but TikTok is a very big sales and social media platform right now, but didn't have that when I made this. So you'll have to check out Making Startup Week when I go back over this for the update. So Facebook is, it's still kind of the king of social media. It probably, depending on who you ask, it's somewhere between Facebook and Instagram, but Facebook is still very, very good at converting audiences to brick and mortar, very easy. And it has been trending in average age of users upward for several years. And that's part of the reason that they convert brick and mortar customers very easily, is just because typically these are going to be people that are more used to and more comfortable with and okay with brick and mortar. This isn't a huge group of online buyers. I mean, granted, there's a whole lot of it, but when compared to other platforms, this is really a brick and mortar conversion. Instagram is very, very good at selling consumer electronics, fashion, and fitness products. And the average user age is significantly lower, like way, way, way younger. We're talking about the parents are on Facebook, the kids are on Instagram. And this is really the hub for influencer marketing. This is where you find the most influencers of any other platform outside of Twitter. And we're going to talk about sort of the pitfalls of Twitter here in a second. Well, actually, no, we're going to do it right now because it's the next one. Twitter sells services and ideas very effectively. But the caveat with that is that it requires a very large following to show results. And when I say large in this particular case, I'm usually talking about 5,000 plus followers to where Twitter really works. And Twitter is a bit unusual in that regard because it is so dependent on the size of your audience. Because for the most part, people that don't follow you don't really see your content. Now, the exception to that is that, the hashtag was really kind of a Twitter thing, and hashtags allow your posts to be found by the general public, but that only works to an extent. So Twitter, good at services and ideas, but you got to have a lot of people that are following you. Snapchat, also, since I made this, Snapchat has diminished on these particular points a little bit. And it's not really the greatest platform to sell things anymore, but it is still a viable thing. But what's important about it is that it's similar to Instagram in what you can sell, but the age of the average user is even younger still. And that's important because these people are much more likely to be spending someone else's money, likely their parents. So you have to keep that in mind because typically you're going to have to convince the viewer and the parent that's actually spending the money. So that's very important to keep in mind when you're figuring out how to come up with your messaging. LinkedIn, I always call LinkedIn Facebook in a suit and tie. They're very similar in that regard. But it leans much older and it leans very, very professional. This is your resume, but online, but it's also like Facebook in that it has that social media networking aspect.
Well, it's more towards the individual versus the business.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So,
It helps put faces to businesses.
right. So if you're a service like consulting firm, I mean, if you're an engineering firm or a lawyer firm, you want to, elevate the individual that's actually providing the service and their expertise. That's where it's good at.
Right.
But if it's a pizza joint, it has no value.
Right. And then let's see, what was that? YouTube. So with YouTube, you have great opportunities to utilize influencers, but you can also use it to demonstrate your product or service. YouTube and Twitter are a bit related in that you need a significant audience to really make YouTube work. Outside of if you're just using YouTube for video hosting, which is what a lot of people end up using YouTube for. Like they've got their video, they put it on YouTube and they share the link elsewhere. It's very important to keep in mind, though, that when you're sharing a video from YouTube to other social media platforms, they really, really don't like that. And I'm going to tell you why. They don't like that because most of your video platforms now want to be the one that is serving you video content. So when it comes to Facebook, for example, Facebook wants that content on their site. So they are very hesitant to allow you to pull their users away to a competitor's website. And this brings us back to how you're going to reach people through, organic posts versus boosted posts. You will typically see across the board that if you share a YouTube link on Facebook, as an example, it will not reach nearly the number of people if you actually uploaded whatever your content was directly to Facebook and served it to them that way. Because Facebook in particular really doesn't like people sharing YouTube content on their site. Like they really, really don't. Nobody is going to see that video if you put it on Facebook. Instagram isn't quite as bad, but they are. LinkedIn is probably the most forgiving when it comes to that. I think, did I hit all those? Yeah. Twitter is very similar to Facebook in that regard, that they don't really care for that, but they're not as aggressive as Facebook. Facebook hates YouTube. So yeah, like I said, every platform has a superpower, and these are kind of just a brief overview of these individual platforms and what they are particularly good at. So however you decide to go about your marketing, the most important thing is to always tell your story. Everything that you're doing is about telling your story or a story within your story. You want to help people connect with you by conveying the passion for what you do through your marketing and your advertising. All the things we've talked about are tools to take your passion, to take your interest, to take your product and convey that to an audience of strangers. You have to understand that typically they don't know who you are, and they don't necessarily care who you are. You need to make them want to know who you are, or to know what it is that you're selling and like it enough to open their wallets. It's not enough for them to just like it. They have to like it enough to open their wallet, because that's why you're in business. And everything that we talked about, you can take these tools and modify and mix and match them to fit your unique needs. Couldn't say that there. And this was very, very broad, and you can really pinpoint or even open up pretty much anything that we talked about to fit your unique situation. So that is the end of my presentation. So if you guys have questions, go ahead and hit me.
Yeah, I just, Robert, you talked about all these different platforms. Is there how do you kind of decide how many platforms you want to be on, and how deep you go in a given platform? Because I think for many of our participants, small business owners, you have limited bandwidth. Many of them can or don't want to pay somebody like you to come in and help them. They want to kind of try to figure it out themselves, particularly our folks that are starting businesses. So, again, how do you decide? Do you spread yourself across all of them and try to have a presence everywhere? Do you pick a few and go deep? How do you kind of make those decisions?
Okay, so what happens typically in just what I've seen dealing with clients that tried to do it before they called me is that they tried to do that. They tried to spread themselves all over the place. And what they found out very, very quickly is how time consuming that process is, and how you can't operate your business and have a large or an appropriately large presence across multiple social media platforms at the same time. It's just too much. You have to, now there's a lot of people that they pick one platform and they focus on that one platform, and that can be done. But what I think the piece that people miss, and usually they've really, really missed before I get a phone call, is how much work that they have to put into it to really make it work. Yeah. And it just takes a lot of time, and it also takes objectivity. It takes a third party that doesn't care one way or the other to come in and look at what you're doing and look at how to sell it. I mean, a lot of the people that, you're just too close to your business. You're so close to it that you can't see it.
Mhm.
And that's, I'd say 80% of the time when I go in for just, a first time consult with a new client, I'm telling them things that should be obvious.
Mhm.
I'm telling them very, very obvious things about their company. And, that comes to, you're just too close to it.
Mhm.
So, as far as being on all platforms, you should be on as many as is appropriate for your business, but it's going to be very, very hard, if not impossible, for you to utilize multiple platforms to their highest potential and operate a business. I mean, it's a full-time job in itself. That's why people like me exist.
Matt, I'd recommend just, to open up what the ones that you think would work, and, do everything initially and see what sticks, see
Right.
what has the most interaction, see where the real customers are using it.
Yeah.
And then focus in on it. And, I will say there's a benefit to having at least a page on most platforms. So that way they can find you
Right.
they can find you on Twitter, even though you never post, and then they can click to your website or something like that.
Right.
Let's see.
Oh, I see the chat now.
Yeah, we got a question coming in. It says, what about being yourself yet paying someone to do it? Where's the balance?
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, can you find a balance between honesty about yourself and your business and paying an influencer or a social media marketing company to do that? And I think that the wall or that trust barrier always exists. It's there. It's just a part of marketing in general. Even before influencer marketing existed, it's a reality. You can always do things that will extend that barrier a little bit, but it will always exist. Even with influencer marketing only extends it to a point. There comes a point where people have to experience it on their own. So to answer the question, there is a balance, but where that balance is varies by what your business is and who your customer is and how you're going about talking to them and where you're talking to them.
What, and that you don't necessarily need to pay an influencer from the start.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very important. Yeah.
You as the owner can give so much credibility.
Right.
And you can give your opinions, put your face on it, and try to be as plain and upfront as possible. And then to extend it further, then you find your customers, you take photos of them doing or your products, and try to get feedback that way.
Right.
And then when you still wanting to go even further than that, then you can get a third party to come in and look at it.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't say it's a balance. It's more of a staging,
mm-hmm.
and that paid influencer is not the first stage, but really one of the last stages that you go to.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of once you've used up that trust up to that point, and then you need to take that next step. That's when you get outside. You should have enough credibility built into yourself to get yourself going, to get your marketing campaign off the ground. And that's probably something I didn't convey very well. You can start out on your own. You have to start out on your own, typically, because your budget isn't going to necessarily support it. So these are just steps. And then, like Andrew said, influencer marketing or even guerrilla marketing is going to be closer to that last step more so than the first.
Okay, well, we're coming up on our time, and let me just say a couple words, and I'll turn it over to Andrew to close us out. So, Robert, thank you very much. This has been very helpful. And as to the participants, thanks for joining us. As I said, let us know. You can go to middlegeorgia.score.org and send us email about things you'd like to see, or let the chamber know. So we're here to try to help you. Thanks for joining, Robert. Thank you again. And on behalf of the SCORE folks, Andrew, I really appreciate the Greater Macon Chamber of Commerce supporting this effort and hosting us.
Yeah, it's been fun, and we'll be back in 2 weeks on the October 28th with Matthew Michael with M&R Marketing to talk about overall marketing strategy and how to set that up. We did get another question in from Zeta, so I'll tell you what is we'll get that answer to you privately and send over back to you. But thank you for joining us. This recording will go up on the MaconChamber.com website and as well as on social media. So if you want to check back later today or tomorrow, it'll be there. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks.
Bye.